as well today. So up in the top right corner under the quick links, you pointed out that there wasn't any clear guidance for people who were new to filing requirements. And so right under the quick links, first thing that you see when you look at the homepage is new filer help. We've also changed the three main landing page links on the homepage, which are these colored buttons, if you will, Learn, Browse, and Engage, to include some subtext so that it's more clear what you'll find when you go to those pages.
I can't read those.
Or is there a way to magnify the screen?
Maybe if we dim the lights too.
Yeah, that's dangerous to fall asleep. There we go. We can
Yeah,
get that. That's much better.
That's my, yeah, you will not fall asleep because this will keep you riveted.
Okay. Okay, so Learn is where, so we pointed out that most frequent things that people in our user research have told us that they come to the website for. So Learn would lead you to filer requirements, reporting due dates, and limits. But obviously there's a lot more information. And if you click the button, you see a bigger menu of what your options are. There, you can also file a report, print a form, and find publications. All of the buttons respond in the same way. When you click on them, you get the menus, or you can just go to that landing page by clicking the See All that takes you to that page. And that functionality is not working yet. But we will show you the rest of the homepage, and then we'll show you what it would look like if you go to one of those landing pages. If you scroll down on the homepage, James, you've also told us that the layout was a little skewed, and if you remember last month, we had a section that will feed the brand new campaigns that are registering. Again, that was something that we had heard from users that they really want. They want to be able to tell at a glance which campaigns have registered in the last day or two. So we'll have this feed, and you'll also be able to go from that area right into the searchable database and find any campaign. And we've reduced the amount of the space on the homepage that was taking up. And then down below that we have featured content, which we will be able to control what goes there. It's going to be just a toggle that happens behind the scenes as we add new content to the website or revise things, and we want to bring that to the attention of the website users. We'll be able to put it here under featured content. And down in the footer, we have information about the agency and the ability to file a complaint right there on the homepage. We also have this side menu, which
Sure. You said the ability to file a complaint.
Scroll down there. It says file a complaint. That's also part of the side menu options under Get Help. They can also from the homepage file a complaint right there on the.
So can you go back, so up to the, scroll back up. So when you go to these categories of Learn, Browse, Engage, where does file a complaint?
This morning we were talking about where that should live on the landing pages and with the Engage, if it's going to live on the landing page. Currently it's just on the home page in two separate spots.
What does the search thing do?
Yeah, go right ahead.
It's actually do one from here. A good term.
Limits. It's not.
It's worth noting that all of the styling and small pieces of functionality are still being worked on. And so little things like having to click in the box and not having it have focus and stuff, it's all being worked on still.
So it searches the entire website for whatever term you enter there.
And actually, it's worth noting the things that it pulled up. So it pulled up first the contribution limits, which is probably what you would be looking for if you were searching limits. But then it also shows, the next is one of the complaints that we received about, someone whose numerous separate contributions may or may not create an over-limit contribution.
So if you click on the first one there, James, is that the functionality?
And so this is the page of contribution limits. Again, the styling, especially as we move further down in the site, is less and less refined because they're starting at the top. But
So if you went back to search and you said, what's the contribution limit for,
You want to say, like, what's the contribution limit for city council?
whatever,
and because it found city council in one of the results, it takes us there. The other thing that you'll see on this page is, did you mean? And so it's using search engine behind the scenes that's built into the site that does this heuristic type of matching and looks for similar sorts of words. And it also learns over time based on people picking particular results and reorganizes its rankings. It's a pretty sophisticated search engine that's going on the back end. And as we add more content, of course, the results will get better and better. And we only have a small portion of the content migrated at this point.
Is there a link, like if I wanted to look up something in 42A17 or regulations of WATS, where would I go? Do we have a link to those? Quick links are down below under other resources.
you just type in RCW or search.
So the laws and rules will be under Learn. We can also put that in one of the other menus that goes straight from the home page. And if maybe this would be a good time to look at that landing page that they would find if they go here. Click on the word Learn. Yeah. So this is actually a mock-up of two different pages that they're still working on to create the whole page. So it's a little skewed, but it's basically going to look like this. So at the top, right here in the center, we've got information for the new filers who need extra help at this point, because this is their initial run. And then if you go down the page a little bit, we have the next big menu there on the left-hand side. And these are the things that people have told us that they need the most. They need to get to quickly. And then if you go down a little bit further, we have more. And there you'll find laws and rules and commission interpretations.
Where's this?
Under
Right. I feel like I'm doing my driver's license test.
Yeah, and this being an image, it doesn't zoom very well.
So these won't be the actual fonts and colors, it'll be easier.
Yes, it'll be considerably
More
bigger.
readable.
This is a picture grabbed from a screenshot.
Yes.
Two of them bunched together to top it off.
So you guys, could you go back up to the analytics? What did the analytics tell us that's driving our decisions about what people most need and want?
So there were 3 different levels of studies done. There was just a quick little survey at the staff level before we ever entered into a contract that we turned over to our developers team. And that survey was just on the homepage and sent out to the stakeholder list, and people could take it as they came to the website. And it said, tell us the 3 things that you want to do when you come to our website. Then, once we entered into the contract and they started the month of user research, they did actual face-to-face live interaction with users. They had 70-some people that volunteered through our own survey to help us. We're all invited to come in and sit down with a live person from the development team, and they went through a card sorting exercise to determine what the most important things to those users would be when they come to our website. And then there was a third phase that was done by the development team, that looking at all of the analytics that we had collected in the past years from our users. Where do they go when they come to the website? What is their clicking path? How much does it happen that someone lands on a particular page and then just bounces away from the website, goes away? That sort of information.
And then what did that tell us about priorities?
So that told us that people were basically interested in three big things. That was, they want to know what's going on with enforcement. They want to file, they know that they need to file something and they want to file it. And they're interested in knowing what the commission is doing. And so that's really what drove these three sections of the website, where we have everything that you need to know about filing, even if you're not a filer, but you're interested in knowing when someone has to file their next report. So you can learn about those things, and then browses all of the data that we've collected, and any analysis that we've done, like charts and graphs, will be found under the browse page, and then engage with the commission. And then we've also tried to capture the most important things, the most frequent uses, right up in our quick links, which was file your report online, follow the complaints, and know what the reporting dates are. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, James?
The other thing that was done is part of doing the sort of compilation of all that analysis was developing some user personas. And one of the goals is to try to narrow down a whole bunch of different ways and groups that may use the site into a few, so that it has a more cohesive feel than something kind of cobbled together to try to meet every purpose. And so we came up with two distinct personas that a large number, particularly of the regulated community, would fit into those two personas. And actually the commissioners also picked up on what those are, and that came across last month when we were discussing it, that we have folks that come to our site that know what they're doing, that are savvy, that want us to get them to the right place quickly. I don't want to have to mess around or browse around to find it. And then we have the folks that it's all new to them and they need help. And those were those two big populations that were identified by putting all that data together.
And in this new website, we have two layers. We've got the homepage, and then we've got, I think the next layer is each of these landing pages. And that's really it. Everything that is something that the person wants is either on this first layer of the homepage or the next landing page. Unlike our current site, which sometimes you have to go 4 clicks in to figure out where it is that you're going to find something that you want.
Take us through new filer help. What happens when you're, is it active yet?
It will, no, we can't, because that's not something that's functioning yet, but it will be a series of frequently asked questions that we have developed over the years. And for the candidates, for example, it's going to go through, do I have to file something? Or where can I find information about political advertising requirements? What are my reporting dates? Am I subject to contribution limits? What happens if I don't do something right? I think are the main topics that are covered in the frequently asked questions. And it's not gonna be one big thing that they have to read through. They'll see all the single questions there and they can click and find the answer.
Are we thinking of doing a training video there or help, here's the form and when you press on this, it's telling you things? So is it some interactive assistance?
Not at the original launch, but those things would be great to have, and we can certainly create them. One of your strategic plan items, and something that our staff is actually trying to come up with a plan for right now, is just some online help. And what areas, and as part of our plan, we're trying to figure out what does that look like, and where is the help needed most? Where are we going to get the most bang for our buck?
I'll just add a little bit to that, that we will still have links also to some of that content that we currently have. And so for Orca, the online campaign reporting software, we have tutorials that are just that are step-by-step, do this, then do this. And we'll have links to all of those videos still in the new website as well. And then the other thing, a little bit off topic, but of course I'm pretty excited about, is all the progress that the team is making on the new lobbyist application. And a lot of help and instruction is built into the application. So that's something that we'd like to give the commission a demo early on as well. So if the commissioners are interested in seeing a demonstration, it would probably take us about 30 to 40 minutes to walk through the state of the application where it is now, and it's about halfway done. We meet with our lobbyist stakeholder group every 2 weeks and give them demos of each piece of functionality, though it's at a state where it's pretty fun to show off in the state it is now. And so if the commissioners are interested in seeing that at next month's meeting, I'd be happy to have one of the staff come over and walk you through the application.
Yeah, well, just a couple of quick comments. I think this is an improvement. I think it would be really important to do two things. One is to have easy access to the laws and regulations. Some sort of quick that makes it really easy for somebody to design somewhere on this page so that you can get that resource. I think that would be helpful to the compliance community, the candidates. It might even be helpful to the commissioners.
On this page.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that way, everybody can get it easily. Because rarely you have a question just about one provision because they your hands. And then I was having difficulty. I understand you want to have one word on each of those three to enter each of those three sort of portals. The last one really is the commission's work, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just not sure that explains what it is. And maybe it's if you have commission agendas and something that suggests that that's the work of the commission is where you find that. Some way, shape, or form, maybe commission meeting agendas or reports. Because this is agency reports. Could that be from the Department of Motor Vehicles or?
So it could say PDC.
So do you think if we just added the word commission in front of meeting agendas there, that would solve it?
A lot. Just so someone, if they were looking to find what on earth we're doing.
Well, and the words are things that are pretty easy for us to change up until we're finally satisfied. Sort of the how it's laid out and the coding that goes on to link things up is much harder to change. But I think everyone continues to I won't say struggle, but ponder whenever you look at this whether those words are helpful or not helpful. But they're sort of our best placeholders for now. So if you think of anything, don't hesitate to say, how about this? Good.
I mean, I'm not going to.
Good.
Under browse where it says campaign data. I don't know what campaign data is. I know what campaign reports are, expenditure reports are, or receipts, campaign receipts / expenditure reports. Just something that just cues people that it's in the same nomenclature as everything else we do, so that
So would you,
It's helpful to just to guide.
would you say for there, for example, if it said view reports filed, or?
Yeah, I mean,
Something that's, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, just something that helps people. Browsing is, I want to look up, this interesting So I'm browsing, that might get that, but I want to know where that is.
Or maybe even just have the verb view campaign data or search campaign data or something. What it is that they're doing there. I would say similarly on the word limits where it says learn. So again, you're not speaking PDC, so we all know what we mean by the word limits, but maybe in terms of outward facing public, it would be campaign expenditure limits or contribution limits or something that's a little more intuitive to somebody who's not already embedded in the system.
For the engage one, as I was listening to Commissioner Deginger, it kind of occurred to me that maybe it's as simple as engage the commission, meetings, reports, comma, something else that makes it really clear, and actually the language kind of flows. And you'll notice one of the things about this is that they are all action verbs. And from the designers, it's kind of funny to me that some of the nuances don't immediately pop to mind, but they spend, of course, all this time browsing sites trying to understand how it feeds into a person's brain, and maintaining consistency is an important thing. And so the language flows really well with that. Does that seem like a lot better fit?
Well, there is a lot of research about what works best for folks, and so we need to the extent we can do this empirically, I think that's great. And if about isn't as clear to folks as engage based on that research, to me about is a clearer when you're talking about the commission business than engage. But again, the whole reason for having a consultant doing research and doing the analytics and having folks who look at website design metrics is to make sure we're not basing it on our gut instincts, but we're basing it on.
Right. In fact, we asked them to change the word engage after the last meeting to include something that said the commission. And they pointed out that you want consistency, and that people do come to a website to do something, and so that's the reason why they want for the verbs.
To me, a critically important thing is using the search box, testing it in all different ways for you guys to then pre-program it to take people to the most helpful answers based on the analytics. So that you can come in and put in the search a term that's not a specific term of art, and it's actually going to take you not to a list of things, but to the things our analytics tell us people need or are looking for the most, right? So that means doing a lot of beta testing, if you will, of the search engine piece of this and designing the back architecture to drive to the right answer. So if it's not intuitively obvious here in these three landing pages, then the search has to be not multiple steps, right? That's our backup.
And the search functionality is a primary component of the request for proposals that we made and the proposals that we got back, and we scored it very heavily for that reason, because as much as we can do to design to make the site engaging, of course, is important. But search is sort of the new way that folks expect the internet to work, is for search. And so, without getting into a ton of technical detail about it, the search engine behind the site is called Apache Solr, and it's a highly advanced search engine that has lots of heuristics and weighting, specifically for the things that you're talking about. And we specified exactly that in the RFP, that the vendor needed to be able to implement Solr and a feature that's called faceted search, where your search becomes driven by the facets that you're diving into. And so a lot of work is still going on. In fact, Lori and I didn't quite know if we were going to even be able to demonstrate the search this morning because we weren't sure how far along we had come. But it is a major piece of the work that we've paid for them to do.
So James, if you went up to the top in the search box and put in just the word complaint, so for me, so that's what I mean. So I would, based on just gut instinct, not empirical research, when I hit complaint, I would want something to, does it take you to how to file a complaint? Does it take you to most frequent complaints? Does it take you to search other people's complaints? Like, what are the priorities that people are looking, rather than a random list of anything that has the word complaint in it?
Yeah, so that's where the weighting comes in, and no weighting has been done to the search results at this point. And the weighting is also something that's going to have to be tuned over time because this Solar engine is collecting data about what search terms are actually getting used over time. And so then going in and looking at those search terms, we'll start to see things like file a complaint comes up heavily. And so that'll clue us in to go add additional weighting for that search to say, go to the file a complaint page as the first item, not to do the full list of complaints.
And I guess to be more articulate, what I'm asking is whether when we're starting this now, whether we're using the analytics of which we're already aware to do that initial weighting, WEIGHTING. So given what we know about what people are looking for related to complaints, can we launch the website with weighting that's consistent with that? Or what we know about when people say file or report or the other key?
We didn't include doing that level of tuning in the search setup. And I didn't even consider it, I think. Maybe I did, just within the scope of what we had to work with. Because we have a pretty small, in terms of doing a website project. And so definitely something that we'll do as we see things start to get rolling, to start tuning some of the search results. And we'll have an opportunity to do a bit of that as we start testing the search functionality as the site gets implemented. It's heavily weighted on its own right now based on the amount of content. And so we haven't generated or migrated much of the content, but we moved all of the complaints because they were done in a big batch. So I don't remember the number, but there's a few hundred complaints already in the site. And so they're going to show up really high in the search results, just given the sheer number of them that are in there right now.
So, for example, if we're looking to see what complaints are pending, what enforcement actions are pending.
Follow complaints. It's the quick link.
Okay, but so why, when you put in complaints in that search box, is it not taking you to the same place our quick link takes you to?
To the search through the complaint results page, basically. It doesn't exist yet. So there is a page, so when you go to follow complaints, it will take you to a page that's very similar to what we actually have on the website currently. The new complaints section that we have on the website where it lists them all out and you can search through just the complaints. They're setting up a similar kind of thing, but they're going to add more filters to it so that we can filter on specific criteria rather than just searching across all the complaints. That isn't done at all yet. All the complaints have been moved, but that's as far as we've gotten with that.
So maybe one way just to close the loop on this is if you can make sure that the weighting of what goes in the search box matches what you've done elsewhere in terms of critical landing. So if you click on filing online in under quick links and you put file online in the search box, it should take you to the same. So if you use either of those approaches, we want it to get to the same critical results.
Yeah, and I think I misunderstood a subtlety of what you were asking, and that is, out of the box, the things like the home page and the primary landing pages and stuff all have high weighting associated with them. So, yeah, sorry for missing.
No, that's okay. I just,
That means
whatever
that-
path
thank
you
you for
take, it should get you to the same critically important information, right?
Yes, yeah.
So if you go to the box, or you click on a link at the top, or you click on a link at the bottom, whichever is more intuitive for you as a user, it's still getting you to the priority information.
Yes. Yeah, and the other thing that's not in the search results at all is the faceting to the search results. And so part of this search results page is actually a set of filters. And so if you want to look at just commission interpretations, or you want to look at just complaints, there's either drop-down menus that you can choose from, or checkboxes to check off the kinds of content that you're interested in. And that's all available right from the search results page. So if I get a list and it's not quite what I was looking for, I can see the common terms that go along with that that'll help me narrow without having to know the exact words that get me there.
So it's good. Can you put in like rulemaking there, or will it, is that,
In the search?
Yeah.
Sure.
'cause I didn't see that on a list of, was that on the landing page somewhere?
Yeah, it's gotta be on the commission.
And so right now we're getting lots of the commission meetings. The agendas have been moved, as well as the meeting minutes and things. And so we're going to get lots of those results. And we can do fairly similar results at this point. The faceting, once that's enabled, really helps narrow the search results. And if the commissioners are interested in seeing that sooner than we have that implemented, just to get a sense for it, we can also send out a couple of links to other sites that are using a faceted type approach to search. And for places like us, who have lots and lots of information, it is a really helpful alternative to just searching by terms, because often figuring out the specific term is pretty tough until you see it in front of your eyes, and then it's obvious which one that you want to choose as the category.
And you should know that today, the page that agencies have to maintain on their website that lists all their rulemaking is not done for this new site.
So, because I know we talked about it the last meeting, sort of, we have these words that aren't natural, intuitive interpretations and policy and rulemaking. It's not having people have to know what the term of art is to get to the substance.
Just so I'm clear, if you typed in the search, anybody who's a mandatory filer, so it's a candidate, let's say candidate, because they would have both report expenditure and contribution reports, as well as if there was some handout complaint filed against that person, all of that would come up under the search.
Yes and no.
Oh, that's a good answer.
Yeah,
We're like,
it's I go back and forth between lawyerly and engineer-like answers, and hopefully I'm still giving a clear answer. So the full search the database functionality, redesigning what we call the query system, wasn't within the scope of this proposal. But what we have done is figured out a way to move the campaign registration data into the site to make it searchable. And so that's that, what does it say now? New campaign register. I forget the language, but we made the language much better. And so that feeds in all the campaign info. And so if there was a candidate who also has an enforcement case, for example, and you just typed in the search box, you would get the result that basically represents the C1 for their campaign, as well as the enforcement case that maybe we have. And if you click the link for the campaign, it would take you to the full C1 in the existing query system. So you would leave the new site and you would go into the query system, which we are kind of containerizing as its own application. So it has a nice consistent feel to it. So yes, you will find both of those results in there. Lobbyists and independent expenditures and all the things that are outside of campaigns and committees, though, you won't find details. So if you searched for a contributor name, which was contained within a C3 report associated with a campaign, you won't find that at this point, but you'll find the candidate or the committee name.
One of the other things we talked about is there a way to put the functionality in there of I'm looking for, I can't find, or so that you're able to get data about what people are struggling with? or that you can have answers where they're not having to call staff to get it? Is there a, how can we help you, or what, you know, if people are entering in multiple inputs looking for something?
Are you asking, are we able to collect that information so that we can better assist our customers?
The two, both how do you collect it, and do we have a Siri-like function of being able to respond as people are struggling on the website?
The collecting the information function is part of the search engine, and so in the background, it's collecting up over time all the terms that people are searching for, and it collects information about whether or not the links are actually clicked associated with those. So it's building up that data set. Still, of course, up to us to go in and say, what does that mean, and then tune the search results to get people to the right place. And then the other side of that is part of the case management and compliance help system that you can get to from the current site as well. And I'm not sure if this addresses what you're talking about, but I need help with, and to go type something in, and staff get that in the ticketing system, and it opens a request for the person, so that we can have that dialogue back and forth with them.
Where does that show up here?
It will show up under Get Help, and it's going to work the same way that it works in the existing website, or very similar, which is this here. And so it comes in, and basically we ask them their email address, name, and what they would like help with. So help with reports, request a reporting modification. And then this form changes dynamically based on what their choice is, and asks for additional information so that we can more quickly resolve it.
Would it be possible to change the color or do something to make that more obvious? Or is it just the way we're looking at it now that
In the Get Help tab, well, on the new website, what you would see is that question mark and the Get Help over on the side.
the color is not very, at least to me, I didn't see it when that was sitting up there for a while. If you go back to the original homepage, not the search. No, I'm sorry, the new, not this.
The homepage of the new website.
Let's do this.
Here you go.
What do you think would be more helpful? So we've been talking with the designers about sort of the color palette and what, you know, jumps out and what works, and so
You're asking the wrong guy.
it's been surprisingly challenging to try to figure out, you know, what would work for other people.
I think a bolder color that contrasts with the green around it would be more, so that your eye goes to it. But again, it should be based on that.
Yeah, and I had that discussion a little bit with them, and while it's not graphically probably the most pleasing, this type of help link, probably all of the commissioners have seen in some way, shape, or form, because it's really common use right now. And I think doing something that is in common use draws people to it. And one of the struggles for me, and I think all the commissioners have said something to that effect today as well, is that this is me, and I have to avoid that struggle too. And the downside for Maureen and I is when we say, well, what about? They're very eager to please, and we're always pushing back saying, and tell us no, tell us what you think is the best way to do this. And so they are still working on how that's going to behave and how it's going to pop out and all that sort of stuff. And I think if we're going to keep an eye on how they're implementing it and try to see how it really works, so that it should be obvious where to go.
Because that screen was up there for a while and I'm looking at the sun.
Well, one of the things that they were saying is that question mark in a circle is becoming more sort of the term of art for this. It's not one I'm familiar with either. So
Uniform distress thing.
something like that, an SOS, yeah.
Just putting color inside that circle would
Mhm.
pop out more to
Mhm.
take your eye to the question mark. So if that's the symbol they're going to use, we need to draw their eye to the symbol.
You know, I think that's actually, just making it a dark green round with a white question mark inside it,
That might help.
may be enough all by itself.
Well, we do have a reddish, some red on the front page too, so we could ask them about
Add
that.
that color down there, so your eye would. So do you guys plan to do some media tests? Are you gonna have some media folks try the site and see, can they find what they're searching for, or some filers try as you're getting, before we sign off on the final?
We didn't include, now my brain can't remember the right term for it, but you know what I'm talking about, having users come in and do testing and watching how they behave and then adjusting. We didn't include in the RFP because of the large expense associated with that. It would probably add 20 to 30% of the cost. And that came out of conversations with vendors before we ever issued the RFP about basically what the buckets were we were looking at and some estimates about what the costs were. We are relying a lot on the initial information rather than doing that user testing at the end. And it would have been nice to do. It would have pushed us over budget to do it. And all the other pieces, I think, were core to just getting the site implemented.
We may be able to use some of our stakeholders that have participated earlier, at least to get some other eyes on it.
Maybe, even if you could have folks who are here already, a couple media folks who are close by who could come in and sit and do, so not a formal thing where you have to pay the consultant a lot of money, but just to see if the assumptions being made are working for folks, and some filers, or some people who don't speak PDC. Test some of these things before you finalize.
So we have a few more things to show you today. We've got about 15 minutes left on the agenda. We wanted to show you how it responds to mobile devices.
And by the way, thank you for changing Public Disclosure Commission to PDC and focusing.
You're welcome. We've talked a little bit about pointing out where people can find the dates. It's in the quick links. It's, if you noticed on the landing page, we didn't put it out, but there was just a lineup of the upcoming reporting dates. That it's all driven by a calendar, and we wanted to show you that as well. Yeah, that'd be good. So we'll have an actual calendar, which is a way big improvement over the text that people have to read down to figure out when the next report is due. And it's going to be a comprehensive calendar. It'll have training on there. We'll have your activities on there. And then it will feed into those pages where, like on the Learn page, for example, just the reporting dates will show up.
Will that show up in some sort of different color or graphic, like, hello, you have a reporting deadline in 2 days, or?
If you could go back to the landing page, James. They're not going to get a personalized message like that because of the different audiences that we have, lobbyists and campaigns, and but we have the reporting calendar segregated on that landing page when you click on the Learn tab. I don't think that's functionality. Yeah, so right there, key dates, and it'll tell them the next 4 or 5 dates coming up that are filing deadlines. And then from there, they can actually click in and see the full calendar if they want to look ahead for a few months or find out when the next commission meeting is going to be. And that's what James had up there a minute ago, if you want to go back to the actual calendar. And then each of those calendar items is a link into that particular thing. We've got it queued up here to show you what a commission meeting agenda would look like. So the subjects are, they're collapsed, and then you can click on it to expand it to see what's going to happen in that particular section. And you want to explain why we did it that way?
Yep, a big driver around the site was that it be designed mobile first, and that is paramount to everything else, that it works well on tablets and phones. And that generally can be done with a design that still works well. There's probably a better display for this if it's just intended for desktops. But this is a great display that works spectacularly on phones and also is highly functional on a desktop. And especially for something with so much content, if it was simply all laid out, scrolling through it on a phone and finding the thing, for example, rulemaking that you're looking for, would be near impossible. And so I think that they came up with a wonderful design for us that lets people drill in on the thing that they want, even on their phone. I'm on my way to the meeting. What time is this section I'm interested in? There it is right there. And then the other thing, I know we're getting close on time, but I'll just add is the functionality about, for example, alerting people to things is something that we are working on in the new electronic filing application. And so the same pattern that we're doing for the lobbyist application over time will apply to all the rest of our applications. And part of that is an alert list that's customized to you. So when you log in, if you have your every other year renewal of what we call right now an L1 coming up due, if it's past October and you can do next year, so we'll alert you to that. Or if you have a lobbyist who's waiting for their client to approve the fact that they're employed by them, that will show up for them that they have an approval waiting. So we're working on that functionality.
They have to sign up for that, or sign in for that to get that.
They will need to sign in to get that. Yep.
So in the future, is it expandable to send out reminders to people?
That's actually part of the functionality that's there, is to do email alerts. We haven't discussed that with the stakeholder group yet about how much they want us sending stuff. And of course, for anybody who's signed up for anything online, that's always a fine balance about just enough information that they keep paying attention to it.
Well, but you know, we do something called enforcement too, and it would be kind of cool to be able to say, well, you know, we sent you that.
Yeah, and absolutely. And so having things like you have your lobbyist filing coming due, and it's in 3 days, is a great piece of functionality, or even it's overdue, is a great piece of functionality that can happen on the fly rather than us going in and generating a list, but have the application do that for folks.
And right now, we do create lists and send reminders to people about their F1s and things like that, and it would be wonderful if that was something that was more easily coming out of the application. That would be a big help for staff.
And in terms of people signing up to get things, you know, we've talked about our stakeholder list is kind of static. Where does that, we talk about engage. So if they do want to participate, be alerted to things, give input on different, how do they join and engage in that?
That is one of those things that we put in our budget request for the last budget cycle, the preceding one, that wasn't funded, and it's a pretty big expense. If I remember right, it's about $12,000 a year for the service that the state has a contract for, which is called GovConnection, used by quite a few of the agencies, and other services that are similar or similarly priced that give you the ability, I want alerts about this topic, but not about that topic, and to be able to subscribe and unsubscribe. And so we don't have the funding right now to do that kind of service.
Do we have the ability to at least have them tell us what they want? Even if we-
Yeah, as a stopgap, on the page where it's focused on the commission activities, there's just going to be an offer comment link that takes them into something where they can just send us an email, tell us what they think, where when they have just a random comment to make. When you're actually looking for a comment, there's a stakeholder piece that will allow them to, that may be one of the things we've set up as a web form. I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head, but where you're actually looking for comment, it will present the topic that you're looking for comment on, and I believe it's a web form where they just fill in a field and supply an answer to the
So
subject.
if somebody wanted to say, sign me up for commission agendas, or sign me up for proposed rules, or getting information. Even if we can't afford to automatically implement that, can we listen to the input?
We could certainly do, and this is something that Lori can talk to the vendor about, we have to be really careful about, we push the envelope with them a fair amount in terms of what we can get without doing a change order on the contract. And that's something we can talk to them about, whether or not they'd say that's adding scope and we want to change the contract, we don't know. The function, one of the really neat things about the system we're implementing is one, it puts the staff in control of the content, and it makes a lot of that functionality available to us as well if we want to build a form later to do some data collection like that. So we're leaving ourselves open to that opportunity, but we don't have a commitment from the vendor to deliver it. Other than, of course, the Get Help, as Lori pointed out, which provides a form where somebody can say, I'm interested in. But I think the real target that it sounds like you're looking for is, I want regular communications about, and pick a list of issues, and maybe we generate some lists of email addresses from those, and we use that to cultivate that list. Yeah, that's something we could look at doing, and we could certainly ask the vendor about how much of that they could provide for us.
So we have about 5 minutes left. Is there anything else that you desperately want to tell us about this website? Or we need to know?
I think we've got most of the stuff down. Do you think, Mark, is there anything else?
No. What James is showing you here is what a form will look like. We're trying to include as much information for each element that's contained on their website as possible, so that they don't have to find a form and then go somewhere else and find out what they use that form for or when it's due. So all of that information accompanies each form as they pull it up, and it will be in a very nice index that isn't done quite yet.
Is there a function that allows you to do a spell check on any content that gets put out?
Yes.
Oh, is it really?
Yes, it's in the editor, and we haven't done all the spell checking that we need to do. So if you're seeing errors in the pages that you're looking
I was just thinking that would be a helpful
Yeah.
thing to make sure as people are adding content.
yes,
But there isn't site-wide, go find all my errors, right?
no,
Okay.
no.
There are great paid-for services to do that I've looked at that are a little bit pricey.
Because this is a lot better. It's getting so much closer to, I think, what we're trying to get.
I mean, honestly, to me, what's remarkable is if you compare our current website and then you look at this and you realize, I mean, this really brings us into sort of modern times and gives us something that we're ready to, launch off of and add things to. And the fact that it's a Drupal-based system, so our staff who are developing really amazing Drupal expertise can, make use of it and build onto it too. This is a really positive thing for us.
And if it's possible, just to do a few user tests other than us, I just think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. If we can wrangle up enough folks, I think we can.
Collect the answers.
Grant, anything else? Thank you both. Thank you for all your work and great presentations.
Thank you for your feedback. It was very helpful last time, and you've given us great comments this time as well.
And if I may add one more thing, and that is I won't be here for staff reports later because this is the last 3-day period of the Leader Path program that I'm in, so I'm heading off to there. And if there's anything that the commissioners wanted to ask me before I go, I thought I'd offer that opportunity if you want to take the time.
Thanks for the offer. I think you're okay.
All right, great, thank you.
Next, we have rulemaking. Lori's on deck again.
Thank you. So we have prepared draft language for the commission to consider. This is a continuation of the discussion that was started last month, which involved converting a policy that was adopted in 1994 that was intended to prohibit someone being able to circumvent contribution limits. The limit applies to each contributor, and the recipient is subject to that limit, the recipient of a campaign contribution. At the time the policy was adopted, only state candidates and political parties were subject to limits. As as we explained last month, limits have been expanded over time, and there have been subsequent legislation and case law that made that policy very outdated. And as we look at outdated things on our website and don't want to move them into a new website, and also in keeping with the Commission's initiative to convert some of its long-standing guidance into rules, we thought that this was a good one to move over and convert to a rule. So we drafted new WAC 390-17-019 contribution limits to affiliated committees, and offer that up for your approval. The draft language.
Questions for Lori? So Lori, who do you think would object to this? Who do you think would support it? Whose ox gets gored? Who's...
So, I don't think that there is anyone who would publicly object to it. It has been long-standing guidance, and there are a handful of candidates who are subject to limits who do control other committees, and they are all aware of the policy and have been following it for a number of years. So I think it's established policy, and it's not controversial, so I don't think there are any objections. When we started talking about this, it was quite a number of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, when the revised code got recodified, and your chapter changed from chapter 42 to 42A, or 4217 to 4217A. And at that time, we started talking about converting it and actually presented a draft of an interpretation. We were going to move it into an interpretation because it was not listed with the others, and it was, we didn't think it was very useful to have this guidance that the Commission had adopted segregated in a weird spot on the website. So we at least wanted to move it into the interpretation lineup so it could be found more easily. At that point, the commissioners had some feedback on our drafting, and so we took it back to work further on it, and then there was litigation about the ballot measure committees and that timing restriction in the last 3 weeks before the election. So we pulled it and kind of set it aside until that all got worked out. So, and we've included in here that this does not apply to ballot measure committees, that if there is a candidate who is controlling a ballot measure committee, that those committees will not be affiliated for the purpose of receiving limit or contributions.
Is there any intersection here in with the legal services issue? Creating an entity to provide litigation support?
Well, I think that there possibly could be, if you had a current campaign and you wanted to set up a legal defense fund for some purpose, then I think there would be a question about if someone was making a contribution to your legal defense fund and they had already reached the maximum contribution for your campaign, whether that was an issue. We haven't seen that. The questions that have come up about something like a legal defense fund have been post-campaign legal challenges, so that our interpretation has been that, once the campaign is over, the election occurs, and especially after December, then, you wouldn't be limited by that contribution limits. It wouldn't come into play. That's something that we need to take up probably late spring or early summer, is looking at the legal defense funds. The past analysis has been that nothing in the Commission's rules or interpretations has said that a candidate couldn't have a legal defense fund. but there hasn't been more depth to that analysis.
But we've spoken both about the legal defense fund and the recount fund possibility. So just in thinking about limits and connections and whether what's considered coordination, and just think we have to keep that.
Well, I think you would have two choices. One would be you can move ahead with this, which is really talking more to political campaign committees. And then if you make a decision to change your approach on either what is allowed in a legal defense fund or what is allowed as a post-election expense, then this, if necessary, could be amended. Right now, I don't think that there is a conflict between what is proposed here and the possibility of someone setting up a post-election legal defense fund or soliciting funds for litigation after an election. And this also wouldn't, the other piece I'm not sure about with the legal issues is the cases that we've had where law offices have been providing pro bono legal assistance or uncompensated legal assistance, and whether that is implicated with the contribution limits. And I think that the court decisions have been no, those contribution limits don't apply to pro bono legal assistance to a campaign. I'm going by memory, so that's what I think they were.
And getting back to your earlier question, Commissioner Levinson, you asked about who would be objecting, and I was rambling on to tell you that we have had notice on file now for a few years in the state register, and it has been, this subject about converting this policy has been on the agenda at least 4 times over the last few years, and no one has ever come forward to object.
So the action requested today is to approve the attached draft language for new WAC 39017-019.
Yes.
That's the Commission's desire.
I'll move approval of the revised WAC 390-17.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the draft language for the new WAC 390-17-019. Further comment, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And then Lori, what are the next steps for this?
So we will schedule a hearing either the next regular meeting or the one after that, so that it can be considered for adoption, and hopefully it will be adopted no later than May, because that gives us time to get it filed and wait the required period before it can go into effect, and be in effect by the end of June, which is when the moratorium will start on new rulemaking affecting campaign finance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we get a placeholder to make sure we come back to the legal defense fund, pro bono litigation, and post-election recount topics when it's appropriate?
I'll certainly add that to, it is on my list of things to do, so yes. Yes.
Okay, the next item is the petition for rulemaking by Otto.
So we received a petition for rulemaking from Otto regarding limiting the contributions that candidates or ballot committees could accept from tribal governments, on the theory that all of the funding that would be used by such governments to make contributions should be considered similar to public funds, because of the theory that all of the tribe's income comes from either federal funds, state funds, or if it comes from gaming revenues, that those also should be considered just like taxes. Our recommendation is that you have staff take this issue up and do some research and prepare some memos and options for you to consider whether you want to agree and accept the petition for rulemaking and move forward with rulemaking, or whether you wish to deny the petition for rulemaking, and that you would make that decision at your March meeting.
So we have no input as to whether we have jurisdiction over this.
Well, I think that's one of the primary questions. Yeah. So in my giving it to you and saying, we'd like to do some work on this and come back to it in March, that gives me the time to, I've already talked a little bit to the governor's office, but to get some research on the question of, first of all, whether the premise is correct, that all of the revenues that the tribes have and use for making political contributions are akin to public funds. But secondly, and probably more importantly, whether that was a true statement or not, whether the Public Disclosure Commission has the authority to regulate this sort of thing, whether we would have the authority to say, it's interesting because the petition doesn't say, tell the tribes they can't make contributions. The petition says tell candidates and ballot initiative committees that they can't accept contributions from tribes. And that is not something that is like anything we have done in terms of regulations in the past. And I would suspect that there's both an issue of regulating tribal activity, but there's also an issue of whether the commission currently has the statutory authority to enter into that sort of rulemaking. And off the top of my head, I think that you do not. But I'd like to do some research and provide you with something a little bit more formal than off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think there's a number of legal questions embedded in this petition. Whether we have authority to undertake rulemaking, cover the tribes. To the second, as you said, whether we can regulate the acceptance of funds from the tribes to that public goes into bigger positions because the tribe is a government, the level of government, there's just a whole host of issues that are particularly easy subjects to work through. It's an interesting set of questions. Of course, it's most of us that are a lot interesting. And then I guess the other is if there is a regulatory rule, what is it? Well, that's not well laid out. It's not laid out at all. So I think way more questions than the answers. I'm glad that we're being asked to do that today because we do need some help to analyze that.
Yes, and it's a dense enough subject matter that I think it requires not just some time for Penny and I will probably be working on it together, but also I want to get some input from outsiders who are more knowledgeable about tribal legal issues.
Do you need a formal authorization for us to get Attorney General analysis, EGO opinion, or is that?
If we were to request a formal Attorney General's office opinion, then yes, that would actually come from the Commission to the Attorney General to make use of our assigned legal counsel. I don't think that I necessarily require that, but I think it would be very helpful to have that on the record, that you realize that this is going to require some legal analysis, and that's what you expect to occur.
And I hate to even ask this question, do we need to be thoughtful about budget impact, nature and degree of the legal analysis we request?
It's always a good idea to be mindful of the budget impact, yes. I think that this is going to be more in the nature of ordinary, ongoing advice rather than anything massive. I wouldn't ask for a lot of legal research or memo, but I would ask for review of the materials that I gather and discussion. So I don't think there'll be any enormous legal expense. I think it'll make more of an ordinary and regular legal expense.
This is a question, these questions are ones that deserve thoughtful response, so I don't want to hamstring the staff. The strength is unusual. If you do what you need to do to answer the questions thoroughly, because they are complicated.
I was thinking more in terms of if we ask a different arm of the Attorney General's office for assistance, it might have different budget impact. And given our competing needs right now in our limited budget for legal counsel, I just wanted us to be as cost effective in our requests for robust legal analysis as we can.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think I don't anticipate that we need to do anything that would be unusual. I don't anticipate that we would need to, ask for an official Attorney General's opinion at this point. I think we would be able to manage this within our current resources and working with the governor's office with some of their resources as well. But I will say one of the question marks is if the commission were to decide that either you don't have the authority or you're declining to engage in this rulemaking, and if the organization were to take it up on a different level, there isn't at all a clear appeal for them, but they could probably file something under the APA for other agency action. Could we at some point be in a situation where we're going to get more high-level legal resources involved? Yes, but we're not at that point yet.
So you have your consensus from the commission?
I'm comfortable with that, and we will come back next month with a more detailed memorandum and recommendation covering the legal issues.
Sounds good. Thank you. So, would commission care to take a break before we go on to the training? Chip?
Well, I think I should say before Chip gets started, one of the things that came out of some of the discussions we were having around our strategic plan was a desire for, when appropriate, to have some training for commission members. And I'm sorry that Commissioner Bridge isn't here with us today because I think he would have appreciated this as well. But we're going to, where we find time in the agenda, fill in with very specific training items, and our hope also is that we may be able to use some of the discussion to help build our online training eventually. It'll be linked onto the website, so it's a couple of good things that we're hoping to accomplish at once today.
I think also if we could add a third one, which is, I think it helps us to understand what people struggle with. So when you're doing the training, one of the things I wanted to get out of these trainings, if you will, is a better understanding of where people are seeing challenges or where we're ending up having to take enforcement action or do things. Because there are obstacles of which we may not otherwise be aware. So.
Well, good morning. So, first of all, I have to apologize. I'm down one hearing aid today, so I'll just let you know that. So I'm not hearing real well. So, what I'm going to do and try and do in the time allotted today is I'm going to give you a brief overview of basically who files the F1 report and when they need to do that. I'm going to kind of talk about what our process is here as far as the F1 process and collecting that information. And then in your In your meeting materials, I gave you copies of the forms, which is the F1, the F1 supplement, the F1A short form, and the very last page is some possibilities of future topics, so at the end I'll kind of hopefully get some input from you. So, that being said, here at the Public Disclosure Commission, we require the F1 form to be filed in the following way, by the following people. So if someone's appointed to an elected position or a board such as the Public Disclosure Commission, Northwest Energy, new appointees have 14 days from their effective appointment date to complete the F1 for us. And that first filing must be the F1. Candidates, when someone decides they're going to be a candidate, understanding that the word candidate has some requirements for our agency, but there's also some other agencies involved, which would be Secretary of State's Office or the Elections Department. So for our purposes, candidates need to file the F1 form within 14 days of becoming a candidate. And as I tell people in my training class, the definition of becoming a candidate would be when you solicit your first contribution, you make your first expenditure toward your campaign, you hire someone to work on your campaign, you make a public statement that you're going to run for the office, or if none of those things have happened during the first full week in May, we have what's called filing week, and that's where candidates fill out with their elections department or the Secretary of State's office their declaration of candidacy. Whichever of those things happens first, that's going to trigger the 14-day window that they need to complete the F1, at least the F1. And so, as far as candidates, the requirement for which forms you have to fill out is if you're a candidate in a jurisdiction of 1,000 or more registered voters, you have to complete the F1. Now, if I was a candidate and I was running in some place like, say, the city of Bucota, there's like 300 people there, and I plan on raising, including my own money, more than $5,000, then even though I'm below the threshold, I'm required to fill out the F1. So we've got appointees, we've got candidates, and then of course we've got, like those of you, annual filers. And these are the people that local officials, state officials, and there's roughly 5,600 annual filers in the state of Washington. And they file the form every year by April 15th, and it includes all activity for the previous calendar year. So that's kind of who does it.
Can you clarify for folks watching, when we talk about elected officials, local, and where do we categorize the staff to officials in terms of obligations?
Staff of elected officials? Well, the only place that comes into really play would be that it doesn't for elected officials, but appointed officials, well, I shouldn't say that, let me rephrase that. It does come into effect for jurisdictions that would be the governor's office, because the governor's office provides us with a list of those people that would need to file. The House and the Senate. Okay. Anyone else, if you were talking about, say, like staff for the mayor of the city of Puyallup, they don't have a filing requirement with us. So, hopefully that answered your question. Okay. So, our process here, when we start collecting these, is the very first step is that our outreach department will notify jurisdictions in the state of Washington. Wahkiakum County PUD, Clark County, Grant County Superior Court. We notify them via email excuse me, but they need to go in to our website. We have an electronic application. It's called the Annual Officials List. And they go in there and they update who their serving officials will be for 2016. So they go in there and they log in.
Who's the they in that sense?
The jurisdiction, an administrative person at the jurisdiction. So Jana here might get that email saying, please go in and update your annual officials list. She goes and enters her email and her password, and up comes the Public Disclosure Commission. The first page of that application asks to verify addresses of the jurisdiction, phone number, contact phone number, email address, contact person, etc. Once that's been updated, you click next, and what it's going to do for our purposes would be it would pull up all the commissioners' information line by line. It would list each of you as a board member. It would have a mailing address for you. It would have an email contact for you. And it would also include Evelyn on there. So every agency and every jurisdiction has a list of who they tell us who should be filing this year. Okay, and so sometimes what happens is, say there was an election for a PUD commissioner last year and John Doe retired or didn't run again or lost. When it would come up this year, it would have John Doe's name on it. They would click delete, and they would add Dan Smith and his information, and then they would click the submit button, and it comes to us. And all of that information goes into our database.
Well, wouldn't John Doe, who just retired, still have to report for?
Yes,
fire?
yes, he would.
So how does anybody tell John Doe?
I'm sorry?
How is John Doe reminded of?
He is not.
So under our list of obstacles, or that's one that I know we've had at least since I've been here. An individual who was got his obligation.
So, to answer your question, he is not through that process, okay? And I'm not trying to lead you to believe that there's some other way, but frequently I get calls from people in my job where it's that case exactly, and they ask, do I need to file a final? And the answer to that is yes. But it's kind of a little deficiency in that system. State law says that state elected or state serving officials do not have to file a final. So, yeah. So let's say, Grant, if your term ended at the end of this year, and you did not serve at all past December 31st of this year, you are not required to file a final report next year. It's only local officials.
But in the fire line, I was supposed to.
So,
It's interesting.
So
so Joe, I'm not sure I understood that. So if you are a
if you,
statewide elected official or a state office holder,
the law says that if you're a state office holder, so if you were on any board or commission, if you were the governor, a legislator, a superintendent of public instruction, regent at the University of Washington, any of those level positions, if you don't serve into the next year, you're not required to file a final that lists your activity for that last year that you held that position. That's what the RCW says. So,
if you are a local, if you don't fall into that bucket,
yes,
and we are contacting your jurisdiction for updating the names in order to make sure people can comply successfully, we're not saying to the jurisdiction, and please give us the names of people who are completing their service. Here's part 2.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's something we could do to
Yes,
in our communications with
yes. So once we receive all of what we call the annual officials list, or it's, the nickname for that is the blue card, because back in 2004 when I came to work here, we had no electronic system, and so we actually sent something out that was blue, and they filled it out. And so once we've received all the blue cards back, all of that information goes into our database, and I run a report, usually starting around the first week of March, 1st to the 10th, depending on how the annual officials list process has gone. And I will tell you that that could be smoother, because there's usually about 150, there's usually around 150 jurisdictions that just totally ignore us. They don't respond. And we end up, we as staff, normally Lori, Jennifer, and myself, we divide the list of the remaining, and then we become detectives and try and figure out who should be on that list. Okay, so.
Doesn't seem like the most staff effective way to approach that.
Well, it isn't maybe, but I don't know that we have currently much choice, because if someone doesn't file their F1, we can take them to hearing, because the commission would find that they violated the law. But this list, to the best of my knowledge, is not a requirement of the jurisdiction by law. And so we don't have much of a stick here.
So that raises two things, whether we
Yep.
want to make it a requirement in terms of the statute, what's the point of having the F1 statute and then creating this extra burden, and particularly if we're dinging people who didn't get notification from their jurisdiction
Right.
and understand our rules. But the second might be whether we can send a letter from the executive director of the commission to those jurisdictions now saying, this is what we need from you. So getting the chief administrative officer of that jurisdiction to respond.
Right. So some of the problems that we encounter are that some of these jurisdictions are really small, and some of them don't even have staff, and so even if you're talking about like Lewis Cowlitz Fire 6, I mean, it's a volunteer fire department. There's nobody there. When I call them, I get someone's home phone number, with the answering machine. You're not actually calling the jurisdiction. But yes, I guess my point was that's part of the glitch in the system that we have here.
Right, and part of our hope in doing these trainings is identifying
Yep.
those glitches and figuring out if we can help.
Understand perfectly. So now we've gathered who all those people are, we put it in the database, and somewhere around March 10th, what I do is I run a query, and the query brings up everyone that has not done the filing that's due by April 15th. And so I normally start off, and I'm probably notifying, and it goes by email address. And so we normally ask for a work email address and a home email address. I sort the list. If people gave the same one for each one, I sort it for duplicates. So understand, when I say there's 3,000 email addresses, when I start off that first week, it doesn't necessarily mean there's 3,000 filers. It could be 2,000 or 1,500. And I have a canned response. It basically notifies them in as friendly of language as possible that this is a reminder that their F1 report covering activity for calendar year 2015 is due by April 15th. And we put there's some links to the website so that they can file electronically, as well as there's contact information for Jennifer and myself if they have questions. And so those go out each Friday, and I continue to do that week by week until the end of April. So I do it for a 6 to 8 week period. And there's a lot of response back from that, believe me. As soon as I notify staff normally, hey, today's the day I'm gonna send these out, just so everybody's aware that the call volume is gonna go up quite significantly. Each week as people file, they drop off the list, and probably by the time that we get down to where I turn it over at the end of April to the compliance division for any kind of, for their process of the enforcement part of it. I would say that there's normally around, I want to say somewhere around 700 people at that point out of the 5,600 that haven't filed. And just very briefly, once I turn it over to compliance, of course, you're probably aware their process is they're then going to generate a warning letter, or what we call a reminder letter. They send that out. They give them a certain period, grace period to file that, and then once that grace period's over, they would run another list, and that would generate hearing notices for people. So, and we normally get, so at the end of the process, I would say we're probably averaging somewhere between 70 and 100 that may not have filed when they needed to, and are going to go to a brief enforcement.
So the 70 to 100 of a pool of 5,600?
Yes.
And by then, they would have gotten multiple weekly emails from you?
Yes.
And then the letter from the enforcement?
Yes. Well, and there's one more thing that I forgot to mention is I frequently get hundreds of bounce backs, undeliverables, or Hotmail, Gmail, Microsoft blocking us, because when I send out 3,000 emails, it just automatically assumes I'm a spammer. And so what I do is probably around the 1st of April is I take a day and a thermos of coffee, and I sit down and I start going through the bounce backs and comparing that to my query to see, okay, I got this one back, who was that? And if it appears to me that someone hasn't been notified, then they go on a list, and I mail them a postcard that basically says that you have a filing requirement. So, so someone would have either gotten multiple email reminders, or they would at least get one written mailed request to file the report on time.
Should any of those bounce backs come from jurisdictions where there is a person, there is a staff person giving you the initial information?
Yes. Yes. And a downfall to the system, and I don't know that there is a solution. I'm sure there would be, but given the current staff constraints, when people go in and they file at the jurisdiction, a lot of times they would go in and they may look at who is on their blue card, and they see that, okay, well, there's no one whose term is expired, so I don't need to correct that. And yes, these 7 people are the correct people. But they may not necessarily go so far as to go in and say, okay, well, Dan Smith, let me call Dan or contact Dan or do a bunch of work here to make sure that is the correct email. And so that's kind of what happens is that, I would say initially when I send out that first 3,000 notifications, there's probably pretty easily 400 to 500 bounce backs.
But when those come from jurisdictions where you do have a contact person who is providing you the initial information, as part of our enforcement, do we reach back out to that administrative staff to say, we've been unable to communicate with Mr. Smith, it bounces back, can you provide us the correct?
No.
So, because then what happens is when we do finally get to the end of the game, Mr. Smith says, I never got anything from you, I had no idea. We end up suspending the fine, and we've just spent all that money in staff time.
And it is a possibility that the bounce back was because of a bad email address. I don't doubt that. But the other possibility is we're being filtered. Okay, and that is a correct email address, but the email carrier is filtering us because of the amount of emails that are being sent out at one time.
I think my question is whether it would be a cost-effective approach for us to add a step in there that says of the folks that are for whom you're not able to reach, make contact, bounce back, or other things, whether an additional contact to that jurisdiction to say, Mr. Smith is now going to be out of compliance, can you notify him or provide us additional address, email? We might be able to narrow the group of folks who keep going through the enforcement process due to not having heard from us.
No arguments for me, it's kind of above my pay grade. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but that would need to come from probably someone in management.
So we'll certainly, we can look at all of these things. You know, I haven't been through one of these, you know, it looks a little like a three-ring circus to me right now, but I haven't been through one of these processes yet, and it's been just fascinating even to find out things you never think about, like, well, how do you build your list of people who need to file, and then how do you go about it? But I'll tell you, staff does an amazing job of sending reminders in the first place, and then if people still fail to file, sending them a written warning letter. And I know on some of the times they've tried different attempts at, like, calling also to get a hold of people. That's not really very successful, but I think we're open to coming up with, you know, any creative new approaches. And none of these are prescripted by any particular rule or statute, so we have some leeway in figuring out what would try to work better.
Part of what we talked about when we were looking at the process improvement list last year is again, it's back to the image from the strategic plan meeting of the
Bunny?
the bunny versus the bear with the hammer or something?
Yeah.
Is there a cost-effective way for us to take more steps to help people successfully comply rather than going through all these enforcement processes and getting to the end?
Well, what I think this highlights is we serve such a variety of different constituencies, some of them very sophisticated and some of them not. And it's the challenge we face when we do rulemaking too. It's, you know, how do we make the rules that apply to a statewide gubernatorial election also make sense for somebody that's running for the water district in, you know, a small town or a small county. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And I appreciate the staff's effort to try to help achieve compliance. I think that's terrific.
Okay, so that was the process. And so now I'd like to talk about the forms a little bit. So the F1 and the F1, the supplement, and the F1A. At this point, I'm kind of going to walk you through what I would tell a filer if they were to call me and say, I need some help with this. So the first thing that on the F1, there's no place on the form that you're going to put an actual dollar amount. There's a code table in the upper right-hand corner in every single section. Okay, you're going to use the letter code. You're not going to provide us with a social security number. You're not going to provide us with any account numbers. And on top of that, while these are a public document and they're available to a public records request, they currently are not posted to our website. So that being said, the F1 has 5 sections: income, real estate, investments, creditors, and then there's a section 5 which has to deal with outside business interests or boards that you may sit on. And so starting with section 1, income, you are going to, on the whole form, you are going to provide us with information for yourself, your spouse, registered domestic partner, and any dependents that may rise to the level of reporting on this form. So section 1, income, you're going to list any sources of income or compensation that had a value of $2,400 or more.
If I could put a bookmark for Penny and Evelyn, I think we're probably going to have to change that language regarding domestic partners because state law has changed and all those have been converted.
What about the individuals over age, senior citizens, they were keeping their partnerships.
Yes, right.
So potentially there were some, not the number that there once would have been.
So I didn't,
And I don't know what the current term of art would be for that, for the over age 65 individuals who are cohabitating.
it is domestic
Is it?
partner, but those under 65 can't use that alternative.
Well, yeah, they either have a spouse or they had a breakup, I guess.
Okay, sorry, Chip.
No, no problem. So section 1, basically you're going to show the employer or the source of compensation, how it was earned, and you're going to use the amount code. Things that are going to come in here is if I work at Boeing, I'm going to put down Boeing, I'm going to put that I'm an engineer, or wages, and then I would use the code. Some people have questions about things like Social Security retirement. Yeah, people will put down they put down Social Security, they put down SSA, whatever, and they put retirement or benefits, and then the code.
Dividend income,
Pardon me?
dividend income, over $2,400.
Correct. Now, I will tell you that that's kind of a special kind of thing, because by dividend income, I'm assuming you're talking about from like stocks or bonds or that kind of thing. And that is, we have the section 3C, which is investments, and that lists the value of that as well as a column for income. So
That's what I was asking.
yeah, well, so what I'm getting at here is if someone listed the value in 3C of what their stock was and they received a dividend and they didn't put it there, but they put it in section 1, we wouldn't tell them that they needed to amend the form. We just want to make sure that it's included someplace on here. If someone hadn't already done it, we would advise them to do it in section 3C.
Okay.
So, and then along the left-hand column, you're going to see that it's kind of small print, but you would list S or SP, once again, /DP, domestic partner, or D for dependent, and list who it was. Section 2 is real estate, and basically what I tell people is, depending on their filing status, if someone that was running for office or an appointee, of course, their reporting period is for the previous 12 months from whatever that day is. And if you're an annual filer, it's calendar year. And so I would say look at that section and look at what your reporting period is, and then we've got 3 sections. Did you sell some property? Did you buy some property? Or all other, which means do you currently own some property that was purchased prior to the period that you're reporting for? And if so, you're going to list it in that all other section. We're only talking about Washington real estate. Okay? And once again, no place on there you're going to put an actual dollar amount. Section 3 is assets, investments, and dividends. So we've got A, B, and C. A is any bank or financial institution in which someone had an account over $2,400 at any, $24,000 at any point during that reporting period. Number B has to do with life insurance that had a loanable or a cash value of over $2,400 during that period. We get several questions about that. $24,000. Because if we're talking about term life insurance, you don't report it here. Okay, we're talking more about whole life insurance that would have a value that you could loan against. Okay, and then section 3C has to do with stocks, bonds, ownership of a company, retirement plans, IRA, et cetera, et cetera. And so for some filers, there aren't a lot of questions about this, because obviously are some of us that don't have a lot of this, but for others, there are a lot of questions. And Basically, when we're talking about stocks, bonds, that kind of thing, there's two ways that it can be reported, and the biggest question that I ask people when we're talking about their investments is it broker managed, or do you manage it yourself? Do you make the buy and sell decisions? If it's broker managed, if I go to Edward Jones and I give them a lump of money and I say I'd like to make an investment of, say, 7%, 10%, 15%, whatever it might be, then I can list that brokerage account at Edward Jones, and in parentheses I would put broker managed, and I'm not required to provide a breakdown, okay, of what the individual stocks are that are in there, because I don't make the buy and sell decisions. They could change day to day.
Is it if you do or if you have the authority to? So a lot of people use financial planners or brokers and rely on them, but they can also make the decision themselves. It's not a.
Well, if someone is able to make the decision themselves, then they need to provide us a breakdown.
Even if they're not doing it, but they have the authority to do it.
I would say it depends what they're doing. If they're managing their stock portfolio and buying and selling, then they need to report their stocks. If they're not doing that, even if they could, then it's a broker managed account. The broker's buying and selling and balancing their assets. Would you agree with that, Chip?
I would. So that's, and in section 3, for A, B, and C, you're basically going to once again use the code, what's the current asset value, and an income amount. And the income amount would only be listed there if you actually drew that dividend. Okay, there are some times where people actually they get a dividend, but it goes right back into the stock, and so we would have them claim the highest value of what the stock was during the year, and it would be including that dividend.
So if you got any income during that calendar year from that.
During the reporting period, if you were a candidate, it would be the previous 12 months or an annual year, yes. Section 4 is creditors. Basically, people, we don't want any retail charge cards, so we don't want Bond, Visa, American Express. What we're looking for is car loan, boat loan, RV loan, plane loan, a second mortgage on your house, signature loan, student loan, back taxes, promissory notes, judgments. Those are all examples of what we'd be looking for. Just as kind of a side note, on the website under the manual section, there is a personal financial affairs statement instruction manual, which goes through each of these sections and will give them examples of what we're looking for. And then some of the section tells them that there are things like credit cards that you do not need to report. And then we get down to section 5, and section 5 basically for those people that are appointed or candidates, they're going to answer yes or no to A, B, C, or D. Annual filers also must include E. And if someone answers yes to any of these questions, meaning that I'm filling it out and I own a business, so I would check yes to that. Any yes in this section is going to automatically mean that they also need to include the F1 supplement. So that's the F1 itself.
This is, we've talked about this one before, but especially in A, if you're a member of we don't use the word shareholder, we don't use the word professional, the phrase professional corporation, and I think that's a bit of I think it might be explained in the instructions, but it's not on the form itself. So I know that can be a little bit confusing to some filers have commented.
I would agree.
And that's at our discretion. This isn't required language from the statute.
I don't know.
I don't think so. I think this is what we have come up with to try to explain things, so I think we could provide some.
My understanding about any of our forms is they're in rural.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
are.
they are.
And so we can't just, because Chip frequently, when I first came to work here, said we unilaterally need to like take this out and add this because it's really confusing and it's in rural.
But we can change.
So we can change it though.
Right, yeah,
Yes.
anything you learn to be confusing is what we want to.
So, I have just a few minutes left. So, on the F1 supplement, which if anyone answered yes to A, B, C, D, or E, oops, sorry. Basically what I tell people is, so you're going to fill out your name at the top, and then basically you are going to include information for that entity which you chose yes for in A, B, C, or D. And once again, the only place where we want an actual dollar amount would be in the section that says payments entity, meaning the business or corporation or board that you serve on, received from the governmental unit in which you seek or hold office. So for those of you that are here that file an F1, basically that would mean you hold a position at the Public Disclosure Commission, and so basically, if you had an outside business, a law firm or something like that, then did the Public Disclosure Commission pay any fees to your law firm? And if so, there's an actual dollar amount listed here. Other than that, we then ask, did this entity receive payments of $12,000 or more from any other government agency? Did that entity receive payments of $12,000 or more from any business customers? And last but not least, does the entity own any real estate in the state of Washington in which there's a 10% or more, and an assessed value of property is over $2,400. So you would have to have a 10% ownership in that property in order to list that. And so the other part on F1 supplement is parts B and C, lobbying activity, and food, travel, and seminars, which elected officials have to list those payments or those gifts. Any questions about the supplement? And then that leaves us with the F1A, and the F1A is commonly known as the short form when people call up. The biggest question that I get from January 1st to April 30th is, can I do the short form? And my response to that is, well, you're allowed to do this form if there's been no changes or there's been only minor changes. Okay, so that's the first thing. If someone had a spouse that was deceased or they got married, that would be a major change, because that would obviously be it may be a lot of stuff that needs to get added financially. And so that's the first thing. So I say if there's been no changes or minor changes, you may be eligible to file this report. The reason for the may is that when someone files an F1 report, if there's been no changes or minor changes in subsequent years, they are allowed to file an F1A 3 years running. Okay? In the 4th year after we've received those 3 F1s, by law they're required to file another full one. And so that's basically the system. So the way that this form is supposed to work is that the filer would review their previous filings, and then they would include the information down here, listing that, basically attesting to the fact that they reviewed their F1 report that was dated on such and such, and then listing any dates of any previous F1As. The most common question that I get is, can you tell me the date that I filed my F1? And for those of you that may know me a little better than some others, I tend to not candy coat it. I say to them, well, if you have to ask me the date, then you probably are not reviewing your form. How can you say that there's been no changes if you're not going to actually look at the form? So I'm more than happy to send them that form. It's pretty easy to PDF it and just email it to them so they can review it. But this form is only allowed to be done 3 years running. Okay. And it goes along the same basis as the F1 itself, in that no place on the form where you're putting an actual dollar amount, you're using the letter codes.
So is there anywhere in the instructions that defines minor, for minor changes?
There is none.
That's fine.
I can tell you that what I've been told in the past is what's a minor change, and a minor change would be you can put as much information on there as you can get in that space, and that's a minor change. Other than the fact that, sarcastically, if someone won the lottery, obviously it's a major change, so.
You refinanced your house, you have a new mortgage.
Pardon me?
Say you refinanced your house and you have a different lender on your house, minor change.
I would consider that a minor change, as long as they, in that section, put number 2, remove Citibank mortgage, number 2, add, and then they put it across there in the same way that it's required on the F1. And so my time is done. I would like you to look at the last page that I gave you, and those were some suggestions for future topics. I'm not sure if you have others that you would like to add to this list, or if there's any of these that you feel are of a higher priority than some others. I'm looking for some kind of input here. If there is none, I'll proceed at my leisure.
I would appreciate a prioritization based on the, again, the analytics, so the numbers of types of enforcement actions we have to take, or what people seem to be struggling with the most, so that we're focusing our process improvements on where we can be most helpful.
Okay.
I'd be interested in the what you've got next, which would be the independent expenditures, since we're zooming into a big cycle.
Good. Well, I thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Jim. Someone need a break, or could we need next 5 minutes and then break for lunch? If we don't take a break, we'll have extra time. Because we unfortunately staff queued up this much. We'll begin staff reports with the executive director. Corner.
And for staff reports, it is a very short period of time. James is not here to give his report on technology, and I will cover compliance, at least a chart as well. You have my report. The two things that I think I wanted to make sure you're okay with was that I owe you, sort of on my debit list, a draft strategic plan. We have taken the notes from our gathering and put them onto paper, but we haven't organized them. So I will get you that before the March meeting, and not that I expect to finalize it, but so that you have it before the March meeting. And I also owe you a memo on legal services and budget and how we're doing and how all that works, and I will get that to you before the March meeting as well. But I didn't have anything else on my executive director list to talk about, so I'm open to any questions you have.
Can you give us the follow-up on the enforcement issue that was raised? Do you want to talk about that in the enforcement staff report?
And so the issue that was raised was after our last meeting, I got an email from an individual who had made a complaint regarding a state senator and her campaign funds, saying that the campaign funds that were posted on our website appeared to be greatly, significantly larger than what he could account for looking at contributions. The reason this was an issue, aside from the subject matter, is that it was not on the list of the items that I had provided to you after the last meeting. We traced it back and found out that, yes, he had made a complaint in October, and we actually started working with the campaign back in October, and the campaign treasurer to try to sort out the errors on the campaign reports. That was the time when we were transitioning from our list of complaints in the T-files into the Freshdesk system, and when this matter got entered into Freshdesk, it was coded as an inquiry and not coded as a complaint or a case. Our system works like this. After a few months, I tell you, it works like this. When people file a complaint, and most of the complaints come in through the website, we initially, a ticket is opened, and the initial communication is with the person filing the complaint. Once we have determined that there is jurisdiction and it's a valid matter for us to look into, we open a second ticket number for the case. And the reason is to keep the communications separate. So if we need to have communications with the person who filed the complaint, they're separate from the communications we have with the person who is complained about, the respondent. The complaint information and the case information is what we pull to generate these reports, that put them into an Excel spreadsheet. Because that was coded as an inquiry, it didn't get pulled. We have since then gone through, I asked Susan Harris to go literally into every person's office and look through all the paper files and all the records and make sure that we had all of the matters in Freshdesk and coded as complaints and cases, and they are now, and I am confident that we have everything in Freshdesk. So we shouldn't get another situation where I tell you, here are our cases, and the very next day someone says, what about this case? So I'm confident that that is underway. Now, the particular complaint, we're still in the process of resolving. We've been working with the treasurer, and we're going to be taking some action on that too.
Even if it were appropriately coded as an inquiry, why wouldn't it have been somehow flagged that it had been there much longer than an inquiry should? This is the individual who said he had to come back again and make a second inquiry. And
right. I think it's because it's coded as an inquiry. That's the only explanation I have. The Freshdesk system is also the system that we use for someone saying, can I get some help with filling out my forms? And the same system we use to say, hey, can someone help me with a computer problem? So all of those generate tickets, and we call out the tickets that are the enforcement tickets. So at least at that time, coding it as an inquiry meant that it didn't look like it was an enforcement matter at all.
I understand that part. I guess I'm asking what's our way of making sure we're being responsive to inquiries? So something is still sitting there categorized as an inquiry.
We don't categorize something as an inquiry that is requiring that kind of a response to someone externally. We can, but even with a complaint, you don't want a complaint to sit there for 2 weeks either. So that's where, in the enforcement arena, our weekly Tuesday meetings, we pull all matters and go over them as a team in that way. Now, there shouldn't be anything that's an enforcement matter that's coded as an inquiry. We have the ability, if we look at the tickets that come in, I don't look every day, but I look about every other day at all the tickets, just to sort of get a sense of what's coming in. Well, I don't know that it's 100% fail-safe. I feel reasonably confident that the problems that led to this one being overlooked are unlikely to recur. But we are using a system that's basically a hot ticket system for fixing a system for a number of different purposes. So I don't think that I can say to you, it could never happen again if something was miscoded, or there could be something in the system that hasn't been looked at, but most of the tickets are dealt with in a very timely manner. We can set some ticket reminders, and we do set some of those, but it's probably possible that something could be entered in a completely strange way that wouldn't then be flagged to show up for someone. They have to be I look at all the unassigned tickets, so I'm sort of rambling on here as I'm thinking through the process. I don't think there would be a way to have an unassigned ticket floating out there for any length of time without it being seen. It would have to be assigned to a person, and then it could maybe the person could make it disappear when it shouldn't disappear.
So can I just back up a minute and figure out the process? If somebody puts in an inquiry or a complaint, do they code it themselves, or do you code, or does staff?
When James showed you that Get Help screen, people can self-code. So they can say, I want to file a complaint, or I need help with filing, or I have a question. And that's the first step. Or if they send an email into the PDC general email address, pdc@pdc.wa.gov, then the front desk folks, the data entry will figure out what they think it is and code it, depending on how it's coded. So if it is, I need some assistance with filing, then it would go to the filer assistance team, and Jennifer and Chip and Lori would look at it. If it's, I'm going to file a complaint, then it goes to Jacob, and Jacob takes a look at it. We bring it to our Tuesday meetings and decide, where to assign it and how to handle it.
I think, at least for me, it's helpful to get a little more clarity on this. What's the mechanism we have for ensuring whatever response we're doing, investigation or answering questions or whatever, is happening timely, and the person's getting the responsiveness from us? That something is not just sitting in the system somewhere, even if it's no longer on someone's desk.
Right.
It's not sitting electronically.
Right. Right. Well, Lori, you want to help me out with the filer assistance piece? I mean, I don't think we've had any concerns about stuff languishing in filer assistance. They're really quick to get to everything. But how do you know that stuff is being answered quickly?
So when this system was set up, each division got to set their time periods. And so for people who submit, it's basically a help ticket saying, I need help filing, or I need help getting some information. I think for just general information, it's 24 hours. And for help with filing, it's either 24 or 48 hours. If a response isn't sent, as the manager of those two sections in the system, I get an alert in my inbox saying, here's a past due ticket waiting for some action.
That's what I was thinking. So on the compliance side, do we have an equivalent flagging that, okay.
We do, but it's not the same time parameters. It's a little bit of a longer period. And one of the things that we've been talking about is how to make use of those time periods a little bit more effectively, but we haven't finalized that.
And if somebody does it incorrectly, so to speak, saying, I have a question about X, and it turns out it's actually a complaint, it would move from your queue to the compliance queue. So if it's, right, if they don't know how to code it when they're doing their.
Right. Internally, we can change the coding as necessary.
So this sheet that I left on your materials is an updated sheet showing our compliance matters. It is initially when we started Fresh Desk, we had a pretty large amount of old complaints that we were processing, and we didn't move everything over to the Fresh Desk system. But more recently, last month in fact, we decided everything that's still left goes into Fresh Desk. So some things may have a ticket number that is more recent than the actual case. For example, on the first page where there's yellow highlighting, the complaint that has ticket number 2329 actually was originally filed with us on June 2nd, 2014. So anything that's yellow is from 2014. Orange items are from 2013. There are 2 items from 2012. And the blue are 2015 up until October 2015 when the Fresh Desk system came into existence. I had figured you might have some questions on the compliance items. I've added the notes from our last meeting telling you when things are expected to resolve or go to brief hearings when we have those set. Where you see something like check back in 3.1, it means things are still in play, or we're waiting on something, or we're not sure, and we'll check back at our next compliance meeting and fill those in as going. The 2 oldest items, one is a lawsuit that is in Superior Court involving the marijuana initiative, and we're on hold with that pending court action. The other is the Aaron Reardon enforcement matter that has been scheduled for April. And I asked our compliance enforcement team if they would be here if you had any questions about their particular cases.
We have some dating back to 2013, isn't it?
Yeah, we have a number for 2013. Those are the orange ones. As we move forward, those will disappear. They're ones that were in the T files and then got moved into investigation status. One of the things we're trying to do, putting effort into, is making sure that the complaints that come in now are resolved very quickly so that we don't develop the backlog again. But we still, what I've been calling, we still have the pig and the python, which is that large volume of things that was sitting there is now moved into investigation, and it's going to take a while to move that one through the process.
I know the formatting is different from Fresh Desk than before. What was helpful to me before was there was actually a description of the nature of the violation.
I think we can get that to you. We put a brief description, the investigators create a brief description of the matter, and that's what's posted out to our website. And so instead of putting subject, which is just sort of the main line, we could probably substitute the description.
Right. Otherwise, I'd have to go back and look at the statute, go back.
Sure.
And then in terms of the ID, I mean, going forward, it would be great if our case numbering system helped identify chronologically cases. So I don't know what the Fresh Desk allows, but in the case numbering system that said 16-001 meant it was filed in the beginning of January 2016.
We have to figure out how to do that. So the ID number is just the ticket number, and it's generated from the system. We haven't figured out a good place to put the year. Traditionally, we had that as our case number, but then we were hand numbering our cases. We want to keep using the system ID because that'll allow us to tag back to all of the information that's in the system. And so one of the things I've thought about is, do we just put the year in parentheses somewhere? Do we put the year in the subject line? But yeah, we will figure out some place to put the year so we can keep track of how old
Well,
things
and
are.
even the second half of that number, is it chronological now? Does the system spew them out chronologically?
Yes.
All right, so you're able to see if it's, well, it doesn't have a year, we can't, but if it had a year, you could see that this has been waiting longer in the queue than the one with the larger number.
You certainly could. Things are a little confused now because we imported the old cases, and that's why I color coded them. But ordinarily, you could see, so on page 9, we have Jacob's cases, which are the most recent, and they're, it's like the most recent one we have is 3204. So that's about the area we're taking numbers in now. And the system does just generate them one after another. The difficulty is that we're also, the same system generates the same numbers for help desk tickets and I need help with filing and things like that. So we'll see how that works.
The other thing that would be helpful is if we can make the system work this way is as we get a little more refined about our metrics and our goals, if somewhere we're able to show how we're doing against those.
Yes.
And if something is shifted, so now when we look at our notes, if it says we're checking back on 3-1, we can't really tell if 2 reports ago we said we were going to be done in January.
Right.
So does this mean we've got 2 more months delay or?
Right.
Really,
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you yet, but we'll come up with something. I think that's important. The other thing that this Freshdesk system does very nicely is we can put in date parameters and then generate reports showing how many things were open and how many things were closed within date parameters, and that should help us too.
So I'm hesitant to talk about the substance of the open session. Just intuit what I'm thinking, if you would.
Anything else for Evelyn or for compliance? Lori?
So I have nothing to add, but I'm answering questions if there's something I didn't address already.
I think one of the schedule things we've talked about is, as you guys are trying to map out further in advance what full hearings would come to us, so that we can tie that in better to the other priorities, so we're able to focus commission meetings as thoughtfully as we can. One of the other things we had talked about is, do we want any sort of post hoc process?
Yes.
So if there's particularly a complex investigation, since we have these firewalls, we can't talk about it, do we want an opportunity to do a postmortem afterward?
Right.
So just as we're thinking about scheduling things.
Anything else before we break for executive session? Thank you all for being here. Thanks for your work. At this time, we'll break for executive session and working lunch to discuss matters allowed in executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, including but not limited to discussion of enforcement matters pending and potential litigation with legal counsel and review of performance of public employees. Possible action regarding pending litigation or other matters properly discussed during executive session will be taken following the executive session, and we shall return approximately 1 p.m.